The phrase that women will say to each other is, "You deserve better." And that is one of the most evil, deceptive, conniving, marriage destroying phrases that I have ever come across. First of all, it's not true because we don't deserve anything. Everything is a gift. But second of all, attacked onto that statement, when a woman says in this deceptive way, "You deserve better," that better is whatever the woman's mind can imagine. The times it's been levied at me, people are saying, "You deserve better than having a small grocery budget. You deserve better than living in a studio." It is a phrase that leaves room for so much human folly to come in and say, well, maybe I do deserve better. And then to create this idea of what better is. And women will leave their marriages looking for that elusive better.
My guest this week is Anneliese, who holds the record for my most downloaded podcast episode ever. She's a Christian wife and mother who began as a colleague, became a friend, and has since made some meaningful contributions to my personal life as well. She's been on a bit of a journey lately, from the community-oriented space of Instagram into the arena of X, formerly known as Twitter. And in that, I think, she's taken her perspective on the road to see just how bad it is out there. Not just for men, of course, but for women too. To see the mistaken ideas about relationships, courtship, and marriage. To experience the bitterness and entitlement of the harpies defending the modern regime. Yes, and the white knight would-be saviors who fit in there too. My poetic streak would like to call it a hero's journey, but I think it's more like this. In her own way, Anneliese has become a sort of mirror of wholesomeness that young women look into. It's not that she set out to be that, it just kind of happened. And on Twitter, I think she's getting a good sense of the perspective that the girls are looking from. But thankfully, and surprisingly, things seem to be getting better. More women's voices are speaking up against, well, women. Years ago, I wrote about how the renaissance of women would require women to have the courage to armor up and depart from the sisterhood before they can surrender into the arms of a man. And that appears to be happening today. I have also predicted that when women fully realize how deeply they've been betrayed by their mothers, grandmothers, culture, and yes, their fathers as well, that the grief will be overwhelming. I see that happening too, sadly. But thankfully, there's hope, because I see examples of Christian wholesomeness and virtue that take things down a notch, because they have such a strong sense of sanity in our insane age. If you ask me, I think Anneliese might have something to do with that in her own way, even if she disagreed, which is just what a sane person would do, isn't it? In our conversation, Anneliese and I discussed the most shocking idea on Twitter, unlearning transactional relationships, the lies about getting married, the worst marriage-destroying phrase, getting past the superficial measurement of men, when loyalty is truly formed, honor, accountability, and marriage, and finally, why date nights are great. If you enjoy the Renaissance of Men podcast, thank you. Please like this video, share it, and subscribe. Plus, leave a comment down below letting us know what you thought. Also, I have some exciting news. Some big changes are coming soon for the podcast, including a whole new sub-series called Will Spencer Uncensored. In those episodes, I'll hold intense conversations with controversial figures and more. But those conversations will only be available on my new Substack, which you can visit at willspencerpod.substack.com. This is a paid site with many subscribers-only features that begins at just $10 per month. And live now on the site, you can already catch 3 exclusive interviews with New York Times bestselling author Rob Wolf, Pastor Andrew Isker, and the outspoken public intellectual Dr. E. Michael Jones. So hit the link in the description to visit the new Will Spencer podcast Substack and become a subscriber today. And please welcome this week's guest on the podcast, a Christian wife, mother, and content creator, showing a way to a life of faithfulness and virtue for a generation of young women dying to see it. Returning for her 3rd appearance on the podcast, my friend, Anneliese. Anneliese, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't know if I should introduce myself because I think maybe your listeners know who I am, but thank you for having me back.
I think they probably do. Yeah, I think our first podcast together is still my most downloaded episode of all time. So congratulations for that.
Cool.
Yes, exactly. Well, so I've been really enjoying your watching your adventures on Twitter, which is, I mean, X, Twitter, whatever's seems to be where it's all happening right now, where a lot of the action is. I know a lot of people have moved over from Instagram to Twitter and sort of encountering a different kind of dialogue. So I've been looking forward to having this discussion, sort of about that and some of the other things that are going on.
Yeah, I feel like I don't really understand Twitter. I feel like it's
Hmm.
aggressive in a way that I'm not used to. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'm always shocked at what will go viral or what will gain like absolutely no traction at all. So I feel like it's a platform I'm very much learning, but yeah.
It's very much the arena where Instagram is more of like a community of friends. I think Twitter is very much the arena. Like armor up, yeah. Get the weapons out. We're going for
Yeah.
it.
So it requires an aggression that I don't quite enjoy, but I have been able to. I think there's like a level of bluntness, brutal honesty on Twitter that I don't see on Instagram, and so that's where a lot of good conversations can flow out of.
Yes, I think. Well, the one exception I would say on Instagram is Christiana, dear sister, but maybe she's reposting stuff from Twitter onto Instagram.
Shout out to Christiana.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so before we started recording, we are talking a little bit about some of the, I guess, some of the arenas that you're in versus the arenas that I'm in. Like we're in the same space, but we're fighting in different worlds in some ways. Like it's a one big chat room, but everyone's in different rooms of the chat room. So you've been interacting a lot with sort of what you might call like Christian feminists, and I think I've seen your responses to these creators, and it's been really interesting for me to watch as you interact with these ideas kind of secondhand.
So I feel like when I entered Twitter, I didn't know what I was entering into, and so I would see isolated conversations, and I really had no context for what was going on. And so I would be responding to responding to ideas with zero context. And I mean, I've been gaining an idea of like, so I jumped into Twitter with so little context as to the conversation at hand. And like, frankly, my whole life, I feel like has been a lot of just being insulated from a lot of things in the world. Praise God. I like it that way. I want my kids' life to be that way. So I feel like Twitter for me was jumping into ideas that I was honestly shocked even existed. Like ideas about how women thought about men or how men thought about women or just how people think about relationships. And one of the themes that I kept coming across on Twitter, which was just one of the most shocking and interesting to me, was how utilitarian people see romantic relationships. And I think you've talked about this, like, what a shame that power plays are being, there's power games in the sphere of love, right? That's the last place that there should be power games. And so some of what I try to speak to on X is unlearning a utilitarian view of romantic relationships. And particularly like when there's the dialogue a lot about, okay, what do women bring to the relationship and what do men bring to the relationship? And those can be really good conversations, but like reigniting this understanding that like as a woman, right, when I fell in love with my husband, the ultimate thing that my husband brought to the relationship was himself. It was not
Mm-hmm.
his money. It was not his status. It wasn't any of that. The ultimate thing that my husband brings to the relationship is himself. And the ultimate thing I bring to the relationship is myself. And then out of that love flows our mutual duties to one another. So all that to say, that's one of the ideas that I've come across on Twitter the most. And that's what I'm trying to speak to is like, like, unlearning the ways that we've learned to use people or to see people as a means to an end, and particularly romantic relationships. And a lot of times how women see men as a a way to fulfill their dreams, but not their dream. Right? Like women used to see marriage as like, marriage is this beautiful goal because I'm going to meet the love of my life and we're going to have this life together. And that's the goal. But now marriage has become, the man is an accessory at worst, or the man is somehow playing a role in me fulfilling these greater or better desires. And the same can be said of children, people seeing children as the accessory. So anyway, I hope that made sense, but that's some of what I've been trying to speak to on Twitter.
Yes. And it's been one of the reasons it's been fun watching that. If I'm not sure if fun is the right word, but one of the reasons it's been fun is that a lot of these ideas are things that I've just kind of grown up living. Like these are assumed ideas and I'm having to unlearn them on my own. And so like, it's almost like there's two different states and I'm on the highway out of one state and I'm watching you driving in, not because you want to think that way, but because you're visiting, you know what I mean? And you're coming out and you're like, and you're saying these things and it's fun for me. Again, fun might not be the word, but it's like, oh, okay. So welcome to secular relationships.
Right. And to me, it's like totally shocking. Like, I just remember seeing a lot of dialogue. Okay. And I'll admit, I disbelieved a lot of men when I first heard this, because people would talk about women's expectations of like, 6 foot, 6-figure. And I just didn't really know many women like that. And I kind of thought that was a joke. Like it never occurred to me that I would try to find someone based on how much money they made. I didn't even know how much money my husband made until somehow it came up. Like it just never even occurred to me to think that way. And so I kind of thought people were just lying about this. And then I, interacted enough and also saw what women themselves were saying. And I was like, oh, this is just how the world thinks. So it's shocking to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much how the world thinks. And it's also something that I've had to unlearn in my own expectations as a man. Right. So part of this is manosphere kind of red pill thinking that men pick up walking through that space. Part of it, I think, is also it's just in the world, this idea that like, well, you have to make sure to have everything built and ready for her to jump on. So you better have the salary and all this stuff. So she's going to jump on board, because what's your offer, right? And then I was talking to someone else, a pastor, a known pastor, and he was explaining that men and women didn't used to think that way. She would jump on board and help him build something, right? It wasn't that he had to have the picture all assembled. It was that she loved him and she wanted to, to serve him and help them as a household grow something. And it was a massive shift because again, it's sort of a remarkable idea to me. It's like, wait a minute, like I as a man can be loved for who I am, not what I have to offer, because that is the secular world. It's like, well, what are you offering? And a lot of women think this way. What are you offering? Because I can just jump on a dating app and I can find another guy in 10 minutes. So, there is a lot of that, right? Girls have options. That's the societally enforced message. And so if she has options, what are you offering? And it's men are taught to think that way. And so are women.
Right. And I saw that some of my tweets that have done well are ones that where I talk about my $80 engagement ring.
Yeah. Oh man, talk about that. Yeah.
Because I mean that's like a quintessential example of what we're talking about here. And people were really angry and triggered when I when I just shared, it didn't really matter. I just wanted to marry my husband, and we went and we, picked out an $80 engagement ring together, and he proposed, and a lot of the quote tweets I was getting, they were like, "No, ma'am, like it better be a $20,000 rock on my finger," or this, like people were.
Yikes.
So, and I remember talking to my best friend about it, and I was just like, "Explain this to me, like culturally, like it's just a stone. It's just like a, and I've seen it too. Like I've seen, well, I think, it's not wrong to say, okay, I'm going to set aside this much money because I want to get her something she really, really
Sure.
likes. And that's really not what I'm talking about. But it was the way that people responded to, they equated the price of my ring with my husband's love for me. And so, they were saying things like, I think people were saying like that this marriage isn't going to last, or like, no, if my husband loves me, he will get me this certain um, dollar amount of ring. And the way that those two things were put together was like weird to me because I didn't see it that way. I saw it as I was 20 years old and we were kind of broke. We had enough money to get married and we just wanted to get married because the point was each other. The point was to be with each other. So
No wonder. I mean, no, first of all, that's beautiful. Second, no wonder people would be triggered, because that speaks to something that I think lives in everybody's hearts, that with inside and outside the Christian world, that they have been conditioned or believe that they can't have or don't deserve or missed out on. I mean, I couldn't, all those different aspects. Like, it can be that simple. It doesn't have to be a, multi tens of thousands of dollars ring with a giant wedding and, a big party. Like, it doesn't have to be that. But that's what the cultural expectation for marriage is. Like, and I don't mean marriage as in the process of building a life together. I mean the actual wedding. Like, that's the expectation, is that, like, I will show you, as a man, I will show you how much I love you by how much I spend on this wedding. And and that's the expectation, right? But that's been set by the media, I think.
well, and this presupposition that like, because if you have to have a really expensive ring, that means you have to be making a certain amount of money before you can get married, which means like most people won't be getting married until they're later in their 20s or early 30s or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's not how people thought. You just made it work. And I saw someone post recently on Instagram. They said, we're young, we want to get married, we're concerned because we can't buy a house right now, it's expensive. And I was like, you just do it. And it just there's so many lies about what has to be in place before you can get married. You just need somewhere to live, and enough, like, much poorer people got married in the past. So so some of the replies I would say were like, so by this logic, like, poor people can't get married? Like, is marriage like an elitist like institution? Or but we've like tacked on these requirements for marriage that like God never tacked on those requirements for marriage. It's like, a man and a woman of the same, be equally yoked. Let's go. Like, so
Yeah, it's I as you say these things, again, because this is an unlearning for me. What the presumption, the presupposition that's in the, well, we can't buy a house, should we get married? Like, where did you get that idea? Where did you get the idea that marriage was about anything material? Right? Why does it have to be more than that? And it's almost offensive to the modern era to think that, like, no, a man can love a woman and a woman can love a man. And I think that's really what it's about. It's, why should a woman give a man her life if he's not going to be able from the jump to be able to provide her with a standard of living? Why should a woman ever truly like love a man for who he is?
I would say the majority of the negative Reddit comments I get, because there will be like posts about me on Reddit and my life and my husband and me. But a lot of the negativity is the fact that I'm not living a very high-end luxurious lifestyle and that I'm okay with that. And they say, well, that's hypocritical. You're saying the man should be the provider, but like you live in a studio or whatever. Yeah. My husband provided a really good place for us to live. It's not a house. Like, and so I would say the majority of the negativity is simply that I'm content with the fact that we've been married 6 years in a couple weeks, and we still don't have a house.
Happy anniversary.
Yep. May 18th. So six years.
Amazing.
They're upset that I'm content about that. It's very triggering to some people. And like you said, maybe it's because they believe that they can't find love like that, where it is enough to just be with that person. And that was always what I thought when I was dating my husband, was it's just enough to be with him. It doesn't matter where we are. It's just enough to be with him. And I still feel that way. So
it makes me think of Paralandra. And I think a lot about that book. As often as some people think about the Roman Empire, I think about Paralandra. Right? With the unman's attempts to deceive the Green Lady. What is he trying to deceive her with? And Ransom points this out. He's trying to deceive her by appealing to her vanity in some ways. Like, he tries a bunch of different approaches. He tries to appeal to her sense of significance, her grandiosity, right? And I think in the story, like, that doesn't quite take, right? So he instead tries to
resonate with her.
Yeah. And then he tries, well, no, this is really the good thing to do. He tries to deceive her with her own best intentions, right? And that seems to work. But I remembered, obviously the deception of the Green Lady in Paralandra parallels the serpent's deception of Eve by appealing to her own vanity, by saying, and you will be like God, right? That's what ultimately hooks her, desirable to make one wise. And I think we see some of that, in appealing to vanity, and appealing to significance, and appealing to, grandiosity, instead of, no, it can just be as simple as loving a man and wanting to be with him, as opposed to any larger material concerns, be it more than a studio apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment or a mansion. Like, it's enough for two people to love each other. And I can understand why women would resent that.
The phrase that comes to mind as you're talking, that women will say to each other a lot, the phrase that women will say to each other is, "You deserve better." And that is one of the most evil, deceptive, conniving, marriage destroying phrases that I have ever come across. First of all, it's not true, because we don't deserve anything. Everything is a gift. But second of all, like, attacked onto that statement, when a woman says in this deceptive way, you deserve better, that better is whatever the woman's mind can imagine, right? So that phrase can be said, you deserve better. And I'm not talking about abuse or whatever, okay? Because the times it's been levied at me, people are saying you deserve better than having a small grocery budget. You deserve better than living in a studio. You deserve better than, your husband is not a super expressive person. You deserve better than, because he's so introverted. And like, the times that it's been said to me, it is a phrase that leaves room for so much human folly to come in and say, well, maybe I do deserve better. And then to create this idea of what better is. And women will leave their marriages looking for that elusive better. And spoiler alert, like, it's the human heart is not satisfied. So yeah, it's not dissimilar to Satan's words to Eve. I think you deserve better is very similar to his temptations.
I agree. Especially deserve better. Deserve according to who, by what standard, and better than what? Because you deserve better is it's a criticism with no defined standard to compare it to, right? You can just assert that there is better, in some sense out there, and you should go find it. What does that look like? I don't know what that looks like. I just know it's not whatever you have that's making you happy right now.
Yes. It just, as you were talking, it reminded me of when I worked at a grocery store, and it was kind of in a weird part of town. And I was like 20 years old. I had a wedding ring on my finger. People were like, it's kind of weird. But and I would get some customers, and there was this guy, and he would kind of walk around and talk to me and comment, I know you're married and blah, blah, blah. But if your husband, if anything ever happens with your husband, like you let me know or whatever, you kick him to the curb or whatever it was he was saying. And so it's like, how is that any different than this woman that doesn't know me online that's just like angrily typing like that wants the destruction of my marriage? Like it's all the same ignorant and just completely, what am I trying to say? The standard is non-existent. And it is by God's word that I measure what is, entitled to me as his daughter. It's not by someone on Reddit, and it's not by someone at the grocery store, and it's by God's word. And that's, it's not always going to look like a mansion, and it's not always going to look like, $2,000 a month for grocery. So,
yeah. No, and my question would for the women on Reddit. It's interesting. I'm sure that I'm known on Reddit because sometimes I'll get waves of dark feminist hatred on some of my posts. Like I did a post about those dancing backpack girls, and the Stanley Cups and the backpacks, and that one that one just got ratioed pretty hard. But I was like, where are all these people coming from? You know what I mean? It was coming for probably Reddit. Yeah. So like how dare I, ask questions if the behavior of that leads in a wholesome direction? How dare I? But
I think you
it makes
have been talked about on Reddit because I feel like you've been referred to like as like her buddy Will. I think is what I think I've seen that. So
that's sweet. We are buddies though.
So I think you have.
That's great. Okay, cool. Well, I would be curious, for these women that feel so confident to evaluate what another woman deserves. I mean, how's their lives going? Are you holding out for that better? Is it coming? Is it you order at Amazon Prime? Is it going to be here in a couple of days? Like that's the odd part, And yes, it's part of coming with being a content creator. You do, put yourself out as a subject for analysis, unless you want to be anonymous, and that's a whole thing. But to the same token, it's like it becomes like an unequal weights and measures. Like, okay, you measure me by the following standard. I accept to be measured this way, but are we going to measure you by this standard? Right? The person making the comment. And that of course is not allowed.
No. And again, they're all anonymous, and it's like a profile picture of a robot or something. So
yeah,
there's no accountability for those statements. That's even possible. So
yes.
Bless and release.
This makes me think. Yeah, right. Exactly. Catch and release, bless and release. That makes me think of the husband store post that I did. It's like that. It's like there are women who, maybe there's a woman on one of the floors of the husband store, and she's found a man that she really likes, and then it's like her serpentine friend slithers up to her and says, "You deserve better," and encourages her to go up the escalator to the next floor. That happens all the time.
Yes, that was a really good post. I think that is that, and also, to me, my husband is pretty high up in the husband store, and just because he's on level 1 for someone who doesn't even know him, like, I that's not my like. Women are allowed to have different types of what they like. I'm not subject to my friend's opinion, and thank God that not every woman likes the same kind of man. Because then, we'd all. So it's also very subjective. And the other thing too that I just to kind of go back to what we were saying is that the way that a man is measured in the husband store is by a lot of superficial things. And so, like the comments about my husband, it's a lot of superficial stuff, and I'm reading it, and it's like, they don't know how when I told my husband I wanted to do a YouTube video, how he did all this research without telling me about the perfect computer that would be good for editing, And he came to me and said, here are the different computers and which one would you like? I want to get you a computer so you can start a YouTube channel. Right.
Mm.
That's not the stuff that you see at the husband store. And it's not the stuff that I am just constantly posting about on social media. Right. They don't see the way that he gets up early every morning, goes to work, comes home, sometimes does overtime, continues to work on his master's degree, spends every excess moment of his life with me and our son. Like all of these things that can't be measured. They don't see the way that he's dutiful in church and faithfully serving as a deacon and thinking about how he can care for others and love others. Um, and so, and those aren't superficial things that can be like really visibly seen at the husband store, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but they're very real. So
That's beautiful, because I think that speaks to the heart of a Christian marriage. And I think it used to be, as I work backwards for what's been done to men and women trying to understand sort of like a pre-industrial revolution model of marriage, right? Before, or at least a pre-materialistic model of marriage. It seems to me that young couples, like my grandparents got married in their early 20s. You know what I mean? Like they might have been like 21, 22 years old. At that stage in a man's life, it's almost impossible that he's anything at all. Like maybe he will have accomplished a couple things. Maybe he's got a good line on a good career, but he hasn't accomplished enough to really, have status. Maybe he's had a little bit of a seed of a reputation. Maybe a higher up executive has taken an interest in him, and so there's promise. But yeah, that's the word. At that stage of a man's life, at age 22, he basically ages like 19 to 23, essentially, like you're all promise, right? And that was enough for women. That was what they had to, in a sense, had to place their bets on, right? As a man's promise. But she committed herself, it seems to me, to help him capitalize on that promise, right? And maybe that would pay off. Maybe it wouldn't for reasons within, and maybe it wouldn't for reasons outside of his control. But she was giving her life, her commitment to him, to help that promise pay off for all of them, for their kids, and for the generations. But now it's like, okay, I want to wait, a woman says, until he's proven himself. By that point, he's in his mid 30s or even 40s. And where's she at? And he's been hacking it out in the wilderness on his own in competition with her at the office, right?
right.
While she's been enjoying herself on the weekends with Chad. It's absolutely broken.
Yeah. And I would even say, because in your early 20s, you are evaluating potential and promise. But let's just say that potential doesn't get fulfilled. Is the man still enough for you? Like, let's just say you never get rich.
Well said.
You never, whatever. Are you entering it for that? Because even entering it on the premise that, well, he'll eventually, be able to give me the mansion or whatever. Like, even that's flawed. And I'm not saying like, yes, you look for a man's work ethic, his integrity, how he treats others. It's all going to
Yes.
pay off. Okay. It's just
You have to
inevitably,
look at that.
you look at that. But I met a woman at the dentist office who I was just like sitting in the waiting room, and we just start chatting. She's a believer, and her husband, I think, recently passed. And I don't think it was too long into their marriage that he became very sick. And I don't know if he was paralyzed, but I think he was in a wheelchair and basically unable to do anything for years of her marriage. And she took care of him, and she worked, and she had the joy of the Lord all over her face. And I'm using that extreme example because, one, it's real, but two, like, that's a woman where she made her covenant and that was enough. And the potential didn't pay off, or the promise didn't pay off, but her vows did. And God sees that, and there are rewards in heaven waiting for her. So, like, even if you draw it out to like the farthest conclusion.
Yeah. And I don't mean to suggest that, a woman is making a transactional calculation about a man's earning potential. just as a factor, like you would be foolish to not look at that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, oh,
yeah.
this guy I'm really interested in. What does he do? He lays around and drinks all
Right,
day.
right.
You know what I
Totally,
mean?
totally.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah. So maybe you should look into that. But yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. Can you be content if that potential never pays off? Is it enough to be with him?
Well, and is it enough to have enough? Like, because I would say, like having more than enough is awesome. And when you have more than enough, you're able to be generous in Christ Church in a way that's just like such a blessing. So all for that. But even the idea that eventually I'll get the lavish, like, or I'll get the lifestyle. Um, like Paul says, like with food and clothing, with these we shall be content, you know? And so I just think, um, and I say this mostly because I've noticed the greed in my own heart, and like sometimes just the way that I observe other women on social media, and they're going on these fancy vacations or whatever,
Mhm.
and it's like, hold up. like like it's one thing to marry a man like who can't provide. Don't do that. That's bad, right? But
Right.
marrying a man that can give you what you need and love you, like that is enough. And that's what most people in history have had, is enough, or less than enough in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. But I just think because we live in such um a wealthy time, it kind of skews our perception of what we are entitled to. So
An affluent time. So okay, so
yeah.
I want to paint a scenario for you and have you respond to an imaginary woman who I think probably
Okay.
exists. She's grown up in the secular world, and she marinated in the secular expectations for marriage, which are around along the lines of like transactional, right? And so now she's coming into the church, and she's meeting men with far more modest expectations for their lives because God is their God and money is not their God, right? Like if you make money your God, you can make a lot of money, right? But there is a component of um, uh, Paul and Jesus both talk about enough being
Yeah.
enough, right? Now that doesn't mean that you don't work hard. That doesn't mean you don't plant seeds. That doesn't mean you bury your talents, right? It just means yeah, right. You do all those things to the glory of God, and you give your best effort, even with a post-millennial vision, and you gratefully accept what God gives you. And that can be great. That can be a great blessing. Like, for example, Matt Reynolds from Barbell Logic, he's been on the podcast, right? Faithful Christian husband and father. He was just featured on like the Lifetime Network with like Montel Williams, right? So he's got a book coming out later this year. So God is very richly blessing his efforts. I'm praying for him as well. There are other people that work hard that just provide a life for their family, and they're able to do morning and evening worship, and it's a modest lifestyle. And so you have to be kind of okay with that. So this woman that we're talking about, she's coming into the church, and when you start talking to her about enough being enough and just finding a man to love and treat her faithfully, she starts to get nervous, like clenched up in the chest, like because her whole life
Mhm.
expectations have been set that she needs to find like Daddy Warbucks or Christian Grey or whatever, maybe not Christian Grey, but you know what I mean, right? And but then settling within herself into a more modest way of living with a man who loves her self-sacrificially, but that may come with a material cost. But she's committed to walking that path. What would you say to that woman?
Is this woman already, making her own money and living the kind of lifestyle that, you know what I mean? Because a lot of times that's the
Yeah.
problem, or that's part of the problem, is that the woman's like, well, I'm already providing for myself uh all these nice things. So why would I downgrade, or why would I marry someone who can't at least match that level? So is she,
Yeah.
I mean, either way, what would
Answer both ways. For a woman who maybe she hasn't gotten there yet. Maybe she's exiting the highway at like 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. You know what I mean? Which is young by today's standards, unfortunately. But like before she's really like made it in her career. But then you have other women that are older, maybe 5 or so years older, that have really made it in their career by that point. I personally don't see them exiting from that highway. So, but we can address them too. Let's start with a younger girl who has recognized ahead of time. She sees the train wreck up ahead. She sees the pile up ahead of women in their late 30s and 40s that are ending up single and miserable and all this different stuff that we're hearing about. And she's like, I don't want to be that. And so let's say she's 30 and she's going to exit the highway and try and find a godly man. But everything inside her is telling her, you have to look out for number one.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve better. And she's questioning these ideas, and yet she still feels afraid putting her trust in a man for this reason. What would you say to that girl?
I would say the voices that we surround ourselves with are going to dictate how we think about these things. And
Amen.
That if you want your mind renewed, you have to be actively putting in input that is doing the renewing. And now, unfortunately, I don't know what the average church is saying nowadays on that score.
Yeah.
And I don't know how easy it is to find a social circle. That's because even in my experience in Reformed churches, I've gotten some weird stuff. But one of the first things would be, well, you need to renew your mind. And yes, scripture and prayer, but also you're going to believe what you're listening to. And you need to stop listening to. I have my best friend, she said her dad would always say, I'm praying that you smash the glass ceiling. I pray that you smash the glass ceiling. And he would say this for years. And she eventually said, Dad, stop praying that. I don't want to do that. Pray that I find a husband. And and that was the right response with respect towards her father. Right. Like there's sometimes we have these voices and we have to silence them and take every thought captive. Again, I don't know how easy that is, but surround yourself with voices that are going to be renewing your mind. And also, like, I would appeal to that innate and intrinsic desire to be loved for who you are. And just the really simple beauty of like true love that, I'm not saying Disney movies, right? But like that, a little bit of maybe it seems fairy tale or idyllic, but just a little bit of that, appeal to that romance that she has in her heart as a woman of wanting just to be loved for who she is. And can you extend that to someone else? Because that, like, I see this discrepancy, this hypocrisy sometimes in the discussion where women want to be just taken as they are. And, doesn't matter what I bring to the relationship or, I shouldn't have to change anything about myself. If I want to have a buzzed haircut and my man, like he's going to love me for me, then it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want. I can wear whatever I want, whatever. They want to be taken wholesale just as they are, but they don't want to extend that same to a man. And so I would gently say, hey, is this something that you want for yourself where, you want to be received on like just for who you are? Are you willing to extend that? Are you willing to believe that it's possible and to vulnerably enter into that kind of love?
That's beautiful. I mean, and to hear you say all these things is very encouraging because as I've said, like I carry a lot of these ideas, right? That like evaluate it based on how much you can provide. That the notion of being loved for who I am as a man, like what? That's not why women love men. That's the manosphere. That's what the manosphere and the red pill tell guys. I mean, more the manosphere. The red pill is more about like spinning plates and stuff like that. So it's more about, dates and casual sex. The manosphere at least tried to pretend like long-term relationships were an aspirational goal. But that's the ideas in that world, is that you win by being, in better shape and having more money than the other guy. And that's it. And the notion, this was the great flaw of the manosphere, is that the notion of it never dealt with men's emotions. Like we're not supposed to have them. Feelings are gay, bro, kind of like that. And so the idea that a man could want to be loved and want to be cared for just as a human being was like, no, that's not hard enough, and it ultimately destroyed that whole world because that's not really who men are. A great example is Aragorn. Like I've watched the Lord of the Rings movies probably once or twice, can't recall, but I'm reading the books right now, and I'm halfway through. I'm into the Taming of Smeagol in the Two Towers,
Okay.
but even to see, like, I thought that they would show that Aragorn would be a little bit more unapproachable in the
Mm.
books, but he's the same. He has the same doubts. His doubts manifest differently, like in terms of, like, I've made a bunch of bad decisions, right? And he's clearly terrified of the Black Riders. He's encountered them before, and so you see his human side, but he has
Yeah,
emotions,
he does.
and that was
Yeah.
he does, yeah. And that was always the thing that the manosphere got wrong. Is it always tried to, posit men as these unapproachable, untouchable masters of the universe.
There's a scene
Which,
in the first book when he's at the Prancing Pony and he meets the hobbits, and he's
mm-hmm,
providing proofs of, this is why you can trust me. But he's kind of hesitant he doesn't share all the proofs that he could. And,
mm-hmm,
but then he says, I hope to have gained your trust without providing these, because I hope to find a friend. And I remember that stood out to me because it was such an honest, like, I want to be taken for who I am. And it also stood out to me as I was reading that, because I just kind of noticed that, oh, yeah, Aragorn's a real person with real emotions. Okay. you know,
mm-hmm,
so yeah. And I what you're describing sounds like a recipe for living in a lot of fear. Like, if what you
mm-hmm.
bring, if your status or what your potential in a relationship is dependent upon what you make, that sounds like a recipe for a lot of fear. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's that is how that's the best answer. The manosphere, the secular manosphere, is the sphere that came up with the best answer, which isn't saying very much, but the best answer to
Mhm.
feminism, which was that because it is true that that whole red pill kind of world is full of men that have been burned pretty badly. That's the truism of that world, is that you find your way to the manosphere after you do everything you can to win a woman's heart, and she dumps you and leaves you, for some other guy. That just seems to be a truism. That wasn't necessarily true for me, because I was just interested in what it means to be a man, and that's the journey that carried me there. But certainly every man has an example of that. So the answer that the manosphere gives is, you have to become so super fit and so super wealthy that the question of you being in control and having power never comes up, right? Because if you're fit and if you're wealthy, well, you're always going to be better than the other guy, and you've just reduced her pool of options, right? Now there are limits to that. There's only so much any one man can be. But the alternative, but when you have a bunch of guys who have been absolutely had their hearts massacred by, whether they were, who knows what kind of men they were, but they perceive themselves as having been abandoned because they were, quote, nice guys who got left for Chad. And so they said, and you can find accounts like this, I won't ever be that guy again. So what do you do? The response then is, either you're going to swear off women entirely and become MGTOW, right? Men going their own way, and you're just going to be essentially celibate for life. That's a very fringe movement. Or you decide to get back in the game. But if you decide to get back in the game, you're going to play to never lose again. And without God and without Christ, right? The only way that you can play a power game to never lose again is you acquire more power, which means that you have to be fitter and make more money. And you have to have so many girls on your speed dial, or so many girls calling you, that you are now in the power position. And the sad part is that that is the best answer to feminism, is just say, okay, if we're going to play the power game, I'm going to play the power game so much better than you. And it's ultimately self-defeating. And so for me, leaving that world, having those ideas, to coming to Christianity and seeing, no, this is God's designed, created order. It's not about material power. In this Marxist, I have more money than you. Maybe that's not Marxist, but in this Nietzschean, I have more money than you. It's the way that God designed men and women to be, but women have to opt into that
Yeah.
now, right? And it's like, and you put your finger on something really important, which is that for a girl who's, established in her career, who has a standard of living, why should I give this up to be with a man? Why should I give up all my stuff to have love? And they make that choice.
Not love. I don't see how there's a competition.
Well, I can tell you it's this is from my experience walking through this. Stuff is safe. Your stuff, your dog, your job, if you own a horse, they're never gonna talk back to you, right? Yeah. But a man who's leading, like, you have to follow. Here's the thing: stuff will never tell you no. A godly man will tell you
Yeah.
no. And if you decide that you don't ever want to hear the word no because you've never heard it in 35 years of your life, it's not a good time to learn to hear the word no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sit with the think about these things.
Yeah. Well,
I feel so blessed in the family and the church community that I grew up in, that the things that I take for granted are the things that it took you decades to realize.
but by the pure grace of God, and that's why you've been an inspiration to me in the work that you do, because you show me, and I'm sure plenty of other men and women, that it's real. Like, it's not like this is going to sound funny, but like, in a way, you're kind of like living the fantasy. Like, you would never think of it, right? Exactly. But it's like, oh wow, like, two people loving each other and just having simple love and simple life, and the promise of something better and godliness is enough. Like, yeah, it's a beautiful theory, but I know someone who's living it.
And even that, though, I will get comments like, well, your husband is 6 foot. like they'll even like,
You got me.
so I can't really win, but I posted a picture
No matter how hard.
I posted a picture of us, and it was still like commenting on the fact that he's tall. And I'm like, all right, well, it's funny.
I'll give you one.
Yeah, I'll give him that. That's
But
true.
I mean, so's your brother.
So is my dad.
Your brother's tall as well.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I had met a short man,
Anyway.
if Alexander existed in short person form, I'd still like it. But
That's right. Well, you didn't sit back and be like, well, he has to be so tall because otherwise, you know what I mean?
I dated someone shorter, and he broke up with me. And when I shared that, they said, well, I don't believe you. So I said, well, okay. So.
Okay, well, you just can't win with someone who's determined, you know what I mean, to never lose an argument.
Right. So, but no, I have been interested to see that. Yeah, like, I'll share things about my $80 engagement ring, or our simple life, or just how we met, and just how simple it all was. And people are like, I'm being brought to tears, and men are reposting it like, what is this? And I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
like, this really touches at something. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it resets people's expectations.
yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you encounter this inside the church, because I can understand the secular world, Sex and the City life. You know what I mean? Like, Frozen Forever, being opposed to these ideas. But I think the surprising part is they're so prevalent within the church.
Yeah, I will say my experience with it within the church is interacting with other Christians online, because my experience, let me just say this, my experience in churches is extremely limited. I grew up at the same church until I was 17, wasn't aware of social relational dynamics within that. Look, I just got the teaching, and I went home, and I wasn't super I was involved in the life of the church, but I couldn't speak on what people were thinking there. Went to a Reformed church when I was 17, and have been in that denomination ever since. So I'm just prefacing this with my experience in the church is quite minimal, but from interacting with women online who are Christians, but are unlearning these ideas, there is still the lie of even in Christians, and I want to, how do I phrase this? Um, when my husband and I got married, I understood that I was laying aside personal agendas to come alongside and be my husband's helpmeet. And
Mhm.
that was not something I took lightly. And it was something that we had many conversations about what is this going to look like. But I was aware and fully consenting to the fact that marriage meant that there were just certain things, a lot of things that I was saying goodbye to. And I was okay with that because that was the exchange that I wanted. And I've interacted with a lot of women online who have a really hard time with the idea that marriage should mean giving up their own agenda and becoming a
Mm.
helper to a man. And I'm not sure what the term for it is, but I don't know, like have your cake and eat it too, like whatever it is. But it's okay. We'll come alongside and we'll be like these, like we'll be co-pastors, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if they wouldn't say they're egalitarian necessarily, it's still this idea that our lives come together and then we side by side pursue the things that we're interested in rather than come together and I become the helper to my husband's vision. It's not that I don't have visions or I don't have ideas or that I don't share them with him. That's obviously not what I'm saying. But um, I think you can see the difference between those two mindsets that
Mhm.
we'll come together and we'll just kind of personally fulfill our goals versus we'll come together and I will help you um, and fulfill my role as a wife and Lord willing as a mother. And I'm laying aside all these things in order to do that. So
Mhm.
um, if marriage is a picture of Christ in the church, which it is, like there is a life that we give up when we become Christians, and there is a sacrifice that we lay at Jesus's feet, and we say, you know, I belong to you now, and I think that can be a good analogy in marriage. So I think it's totally worth it. I think the exchange is really worth it. But as far as you're saying, feminism, feminist ideas in the church, that would probably be one of the main things is just how we view marriage.
Yeah, and that's the thing that has surprised me is that I started reading scripture for myself, and scripture's pretty clear. I mean, that's why I did the Proverbs 31 woman conference, which was about a year ago, because it seemed pretty clear to me that God's design was beautiful and glorious and was honoring to both men and women, even if it was offensive to our modern sensibilities.
Yeah.
But modern sensibilities are made to be offended, so offend them, right? And that if this is God's design for men and women, then that must truly honor women,
Mhm.
right? Like that's and both of us. And yet and serving a household, Proverbs 31 is like she's not chained to the stove, right? Like she's right. She's a productive
Yeah.
member of the household who earns her own acclaim, right? Like she doesn't hide and she doesn't fade into the background or disappear. Like she's honored, for who she is and for her contribution, even though it's under the covering of a husband. Um, and yet reading all this and seeing, Paul's writings and Peter's writings all pretty clear and all throughout the Old Testament as well, to discover that these modern ideas of, oh yeah, no, we're just two independent free agents and you know that's just how we're Christians and we go to church. It's like you're that's not no that's look, that doesn't I'm not going to say that they're terrible people. It's just the things that people take for granted.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Well, I mean, there are, and there, I've met women that bristle at the idea. Like, what do you mean I should have to give up anything that I do for marriage? Like, well, yeah, you don't have to do that, but you don't get to call it a biblical
Mhm.
marriage, right?
Well,
And that's the surprising part.
the thing about Proverbs 31 is that at the end, like what does it say? It says, her children rise up and call her blessed, and her husband also, and he praises her. And
Mhm.
what could you want more as a Christian wife than for your husband and children to be the ones that praise you? There's nobody whose opinion of me I crave a good opinion of and want more than my husband's
Sure.
good opinion of me, right? And
Mhm.
so, like, she's this industrious woman, she's making her own acclaim, but like that there's a reward at the end, and
Mm.
it's the good opinion of her husband and children is kind of like the culmination. And we're supposed to read that and we're supposed to go, that's something to aspire to. But we think the good opinion of the world or the good opinion of myself or my friend.
Forbes magazine.
Right. It's like we're actually supposed to read that text and be like, her husband praises her. Oh man, I want that. I want that for myself, And I tell my husband that I'm like, I'm looking forward to like when we're old and like at my parents' 40th. My parents have been married 42 years almost. And at
Mm.
their 40th, we had a big family anniversary. At the 40th anniversary, um, my dad read Proverbs 31 um, and as a tribute to my mom. And he's crying and he's saying, This
Mm.
is this is your mother. And it's I look at that and I'm like, that is something to aspire to. And unfortunately, um, we get our priorities. Women can get their priorities really mixed up in terms of whose praise and whose acclaim matters to you. Just to say that the acclaim of a man that you love that matters to you more than anything is like, you know, it's secular. It's blasphemy in our secular culture.
I did a podcast with Leela Thomasone back in January, I think. And she is not a believer. I think she said she grew up Catholic. I'm not sure where she's at. She's not opposed to the Christian faith, but I don't think she's a believer. But she said something really interesting that I didn't understand was that women have to relearn how to derive, this was her phrasing, I think, how to derive their sense of identity from their husband.
Mm.
That women are used to getting their sense of identity from maybe their job or their friends or whatever networks that they're plugged into or personal fulfillment. And that's where they get their identity from. And instead, they need to relearn how to derive their sense of identity from their husband. And that if they don't do that, um, the sense that I got was that it wouldn't be a fully complete bond.
Mm.
Right. So because
Wow,
what
I
difference is
totally
it?
agree with that.
Okay, amazing. Unpack that because as men, we don't
Man.
think that
Well,
way.
because okay, I think a really tangible example of this is when a woman gets married, and unfortunately, okay, like women should be chaste and modest before marriage, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's just not what's happening. And women are so used to deriving um, attention and for their appearance or their bodies or whatever. And this idea that, oh, you get married and like your body's only for your husband and like he's the only one that should be looking at you like that, right? Like that's an adjustment for women because they want to be seen by all eyes, right? And so I think is that taboo? Am I not supposed to say that? Like,
No, I'm raising my eyebrows because like, is that a common thing that's just part of women to being seen by all eyes, or is that a new thing?
I think,
Like, is that an
okay,
yeah?
like women want to be desired. That's not a bad thing. That's
No,
totally like Garden of Eden stuff, right? Um, the perversion of it via sin is that Adam saying this is flesh and flesh of my bone of my bones is not enough. It's got to be strangers online. It's got to be everyone, right? So
got it.
that's a very tangible example of what you're just talking about. Women learning to derive identity from their husbands, and when a woman is able to do that and to say, my husband's approval of me is enough, my husband's gaze is enough for me, my husband's whatever is enough for me, that's when loyalty is formed in a woman's heart. right?
Mm.
And then when loyalty's there, the bond is just exponential. Like I tweeted this, something about this of like after a few years of marriage, when you've been with your spouse for a long time, like they just become the standard to you of what is not just on a surface level physically attractive, but just who they are. Like that's your standard. And people were like, oh, well, people don't bond like that anymore. You know, that's impossible. Well, and maybe there's some truth to that in the sense that when there's not loyalty, there's not a bond. And there can't be loyalty when you're looking to other sources for validation.
That's the word. That's the word, is
Mhm.
loyalty.
That's why I
Right.
agreed with
That's that link.
that quote, because she's talking about loyalty.
I'll put a link to that podcast in the show notes, because I wouldn't have used that word, but loyalty is a very important word to men, just like honor is. I think Alison Armstrong talks about how important honor is to men, and there's lots of ways that you can frame what honor is, but the best way to frame it is doing what's right even when you don't feel like it. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the best way to frame honor. So, but loyalty is a very precious quantity to men in the bonds that they give to others, and in the bonds that they experience from others, right? So it's almost the most highly prized, um, quality in a man, short other than honor. And ironically, it shows up in the movie. Have you seen Top Gun? Have you seen that movie?
But I've heard good things of
Okay.
it.
Yeah. So anyway, so the core lesson that that Maverick, Tom Cruise's character, needs to learn is a matter of loyalty. Anyway, well, I can unpack that in a separate episode, but it's hard for men to find men that will be loyal to them. It's hard for men to find organizations like workplaces and institutions that will be loyal to them. And I think men have been conditioned, and this is, I think, what the manosphere teaches, is to not expect loyalty from women. That's almost word for word.
Right?
Yes, it's not. She's not yours. It's just your turn. That's what's embedded in that idea. Have you heard that phrase before?
I haven't. Really?
Oh yeah, that's one of the it's one of the mantras of the manosphere, is that she doesn't actually love you. This is just your turn to ride on the carousel, let's say.
Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it's hard to argue with them. You know, now you can say that this goes both ways, that the men aren't exactly loyal as well, and that's certainly fair. Adultery is a thing for both men and women going back basically forever. But you have otherwise good men. And I think this is the mismatch, is you have good women that end up with bad men, and then you have good men that end up with bad women, and the good people just can't seem to find each other. I don't know why it works that. It's very strange.
Yes, and I think that good people end up together and then they start seeing the other person as a bad person. Like,
really?
Well, I just think that you thought they were good at some point.
Oh, their view of the person gets corrupted.
Yeah.
Like, I deserve better. Okay.
So yes, I do think sometimes it's weird who ends up with who and why people can't find each other. I understood. I learned just experientially being married to my husband, like how important loyalty is to him, in a way that I recognized that I didn't possess as a female in the same capacity. And it was an interesting realization, because I was like, his capacity for what's the word I'm trying? I do think men are probably more loyal than women, but women or they value that more. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
I do think that men value that more, but women can learn to be loyal and to give that in a way that that their husbands can receive. So yeah, it was interesting, because I started just noticing things about my husband and realizing, like, we think differently, and like no, yeah.
I've heard a rumor. We have unconfirmed reports that men and women are different.
Thank you. So and not just so, I'm trying to think of an example though of just like, and I think it's also just stuff I was seeing online. Well, and you even have a proverb about it where it was talking about, um, it talks about jealousy, and it talks about, I can't quote it accurately, but all that to say, um, I think that loyalty piece is really a piece of the puzzle here, because you can't experience that loyalty until you've, as a woman, until you've fully given yourself over to your husband in your heart, in your mind, in your body. You just fully are your husband's.
Mm,
And that's when you experience that loyalty. And when you experience that loyalty, that's when you experience that bond. And for the women listening to this, your husband will, um, he will feel that when you hand over that loyalty to him.
hmm. There's a couple, I'm about 99.99% certain they're listening to this. I'd be surprised if they weren't. I got to go to a party with them not too long ago, and they recently got married, young couple. And the way that she looks at him, it's like the sun just rises and sets with him.
Yeah.
And it's the most beautiful thing, especially given how young they
Yeah.
are. You know what I mean? Like marrying significantly earlier than modern standards. And the hit, like the way that he's showing up as a young man, and the love and trust that she is giving to him, it was really striking to get to see that. And it was like, is that real? What is that? You know what I mean? But that loyalty, that's the thing. And I guess we could look back and see the way that loyalty would be challenged for both men and women, because women will have the whisperer saying, "You deserve better," right? Like that coming from her friends or whatever, today. But then also you have the commandment against covetousness, right? And it says specifically, shall not covet thy neighbor's wife. It doesn't say thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's
Right.
husband. You right, right?
You shouldn't do either, but
Which you also shouldn't do, right? But it's implied. But I mean, it's like, okay, cool, yeah. It's like this is the temptations that the flesh is heir to, right? But these are the aspects of ourselves that I would hope that sanctification grants us, making things easier. Like because we're not just accountable to, um, to our friends or to our marriage vows. Like yes, also to those, but we're also accountable to God, right? A God who knows our thoughts, words, and actions, right? And that's that level of accountability for both men and women, I think, is the important part. Yes, absolutely love. Absolutely fall in love, and enjoy that, and let the sun rise and set, and with your partner. And you won't always feel like that.
right.
Right. Right. And if honor is doing what's right even when you don't feel like it, it is still right to be loving, or still right to be respectful when you don't feel like it. That's honorable, right? So I guess honor, accountability, loyalty, these are the forbidden words, I think, in association with marriage
And I think
today.
women discourage other women from, I'm going to say something, and I need to be prepared to defend this statement. So, yeah.
Yep.
I think women can make it very hard for other women to be fully loyal to their husbands. And
Yeah.
one way is through fear and through just throwing in lies and casting doubts into, okay, that's one way that women do it. But it is discouraged in a secularly, and then even looked at as kind of weird within the church when, and I'll just give an example because I know a young couple that just got married. And I noticed the way that when they walked in together, and they're very young, they're like both 19, right? And
Mm.
the way that she was holding on to his arm, and just so they're just sweetly walking together. And I noticed how juxtaposed that picture was. And she's also wearing a head covering, which is totally like unheard of nowadays. Right?
Oh
So,
no. Shut it
so,
down.
but like the way that she was, I will use the word clinging. She's like clinging to her husband, like she's holding on to his arm. And it's like a visible picture of, I'm relying on you. You are like my
Yeah.
safety. And I turned to my husband and I was like, don't they remind you of like us when we were first married? And it was like, well, then why we can still be that way, but my point is that I noticed how in the context of church, because this was at church, how odd that looked. And I think that there is a way in which women kind of get uncomfortable when another woman is just, head over heels for her husband and just very loving and devoted and speaks well of him. That can make and other women uncomfortable, and it can be triggering. And that environment can make it difficult for women to like fully embrace loyalty. And so, but if a man is like fully loyal to his wife, you're like, you're a good man. And like, it's all encouraged. Right. But like when a woman demonstrates that, like people have like their Marxist discomfort of like, oh, well, the way that I describe this is like, I did a reel on this where I was talking about why is it that when you see a video of like, so sometimes you'll see like, my wife is pregnant and I'm doing all these things for her and, I'm taking care of her. And people are like, the comments are like, what a good man. And all men need to learn from this and more men should be like this.
wow.
Right. But if a woman has a video of like making my husband's lunch and these are the things I do like to help him, get ready for the day, I set out his coffee and I have his breakfast prepared and stuff like that. People are super triggered by that and they start making accusations of, and the reason that I think that is that people are saturated in this Marxist power play idea, where people see men as oppressors and women as oppressed. And so it's acceptable when a man is serving a woman, right? Because he's counterbalancing the power dynamics. But when a woman is serving a man, it's unacceptable because she's already in an oppressed state. I know I kind of went in a different direction with that, but I just think that women can make it really hard for other women to be loyal and devoted to their husbands.
So just real quick, he's showing up on camera. You can't see it, but it's showing up on my frame.
Oh, really? He is? Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, but that's fine. That's fine. I can have the editor set it up in a way where oh no. Normally what we can do is we'll just set it up like face. Normally what he does is he'll cut to like a full frame of the person. Okay. So like you can't see it, but your son's in the frame. But instead we can just have it like side by side like I've done in the past, and then your son will be out of the frame.
Okay, so sounds good. He's very cute. But
he's adorable.
But yeah, I don't want to.
But yes. Yeah, no, I remember that from the last time. Okay.
Good, thanks.
So you were mentioning that this was a couple you saw at church. Was this recently?
Yeah. This is a couple that has been attending our church, Hippos. This is a couple that has been attending our church, and they're like 19 years old, and they're really sweet. And, we've talked to them a little bit. So, yeah.
Yes. I wonder if maybe we might be talking about the same people. There's a non-zero chance we're talking about the same people.
Are they like 19 years old?
About that. Yeah, they're pretty young.
Are they both kind of like shorter and blonde?
No.
Okay, then we're not talking about the same.
Okay. I was gonna say
because if they are both shorter and blonde. So yeah. But
yeah. So you're right that this idea that a woman can depend. It's interesting. I was going to say this idea that a woman can depend on a man, that she should be dependent, and I think back to another movie. It was the recent Mad Max movie, the one with not the one that's coming out soon. But there's a comment made about the Mad Max character by a woman. She says, "Oh, he's reliable," and so like I think the feminist, and that always struck me, that comment. But I think the feminist would say, Why should a woman depend on a man because men are not dependable? Right? And she would extrapolate from the general, from the specific to the general, and then back to the specific. Right? So it's like, I've encountered a man in my past who is not dependable. Therefore, all men are not dependable. Therefore, that man is not dependable, and you should not depend on him. Like that's how that works.
Yes. Yeah. I think women do that with more than just dependability, but a lot of characteristics. I mean, and men do it to women too. Like it's a flaw of human thinking. It's an error of human thinking. But you don't think so?
Oh, generalizing.
Oh yeah, and then generalize.
You mean
back to the
generalizing?
specific.
Yes, of course.
But it's also a fear response, I think, of if they do come across a man that's reliable, or maybe I will never meet that man that's reliable, or again, I think people put up these walls to protect themselves, that if there are no reliable men, and that's just a fact, then the fact that I haven't come across any is not a reflection on me. It's just because men are that way. And that's a lot safer than admitting that there maybe are reliable men out there. And some women get to be with them. And that's like, it's a lot safer to just say they aren't out there.
Well, and if you really want, and I'm going to say something that I have to defend. If you really want to find a reliable man, you have to be prepared to rely on that man. And I think that's a lot of the entitlement that I see in some of the language that gets used. I'm looking for a reliable man, but I'm not going to rely on him for anything.
Yeah.
I just want him to be reliable so that he's reliable. Well, like, so like I'm just meant to be, like, I'm supposed to be reliable, but you're not going to actually like rely on me and give me the chance to be reliable. Like, no, because I'm entitled to you.
Yeah.
Right? That's the message that comes across.
I completely agree with that. Or I want a man that I mean, the classic example is like, I want a man that is, women don't say I want a man that will tell me no, but I want a man that will, who's bold, or like can, they'll have, but then when he says no to her.
Yep.
Or I want a man that's a leader, but I don't want to be led.
Yes. This is really important, because I've been trying to square some of the contradictions in the things that people say and do, men and women, but in this case, since the subject of conversation, it's women. It's like the saying that I want a leader, but I don't want to be led. It's like I want to. It's almost like a possession.
Yeah.
Like I would like to possess a leader and have him be my adornment. Like, look, I found a man who is a leader. Oh, he doesn't lead me. Why would I do that? But he is a leader, right? And it's like you're getting half, but you're not going to find a man. And that's the thing, is that men who are leaders don't desire women who have no desire to follow them.
It kind of goes back full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning of, does the man have to come to you like pre-packaged with, like with the salary and everything? The same can be said of leadership, that a man might not be amazing at leadership when you first are together. And when you as a wife give him opportunities and submit, he can become that. But then if you're going to resent that he's not that way already, while not putting yourself in a position to help him be that person, it's kind of self-defeating.
Yeah. And a lot of women will say, I try to inspire that in my husband, but he won't do it. And I've just kind of like, well, I'm not actually inside the walls of your house. I have no idea what's going on, but I do get that question a lot. And it's like, well, it's not always that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to talk for a while, but I know that you've got mom duties that are calling for you.
Yes. We have a book, and he's like pointing at the animals and like saying the names, and so he wants me to say it. And until I say it with him, he's like, camels. So yeah, that's what was going on there for context.
Got it. No, that's completely fine. I mean, he's proving the point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, look, this is
Oh
it's
man.
not
Yeah.
it's not fascinating conversation. Like he's a little boy, he's a toddler. You know what I mean? But like, it's the gig.
Yes. Oh man, he will tell me, I'll be walking by and he'll be trying to lift something and he'll say, strong, strong. He wants me to see that he's strong.
Oh
It was one of the first things he told me this morning. We woke up and we're just chatting and he just says, strong. It's like, yes, you are strong, you know?
that's
So
amazing.
like I just see that. I'm like, I don't think daughters are like, like unless that's
No.
like drilled into them, But my best friend who has a daughter, she's always commenting on the difference between the way that my son is and the way that her daughter was at that age. It's like
Hmm.
she had no inclination to do the kinds of things that he's doing because men and women are so different. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really sweet. He loves trucks and dinosaurs and being strong and just everything boy.
Hmm.
So
As it should be. So, just can I ask you a quick question about? Okay, so one of the consistent refrains that I hear, from feminists online and off, is that like raising children is like slaving over children, that deprived and your face says it all. Deprived and isolated. You're stuck in the house all day with these little annoying people, and they're just boring and repetitive and stupid, and like, and it just sounds terrible. So maybe you can. I will never be a mother, so you could
I
speak into
have
that.
no clue what they're talking about. I literally don't know what they're talking about. Trucks, cars, because, and I kept waiting. Like when I became a mother, I kept waiting to feel that sense of identity loss, truck. And I kept waiting to feel, you know, the person I was before slipping away, or I feel this or feel that. I still haven't felt it. And so I don't know what they're referring to. There is no one I rather hang out with all day than my son. And that's what I want to ask them is, don't you just enjoy being in your child's presence? Because for me, like just waking up and getting to hang out with him is the best part of my day. Like, so I really don't know what they're talking about. And I'm not saying that condescendingly. I just, I other women that I know that I think part of it is that like I didn't have this life plan of what I would do other than being a mother. Like I got married and we did wait a few years. But even during the time we were waiting before we started trying, it was like uh all I wanted was to become a mother. And so I just it's all I've wanted. So when I actually got it, I'm not gonna turn around and complain, you know? So
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about. I love hanging out with my son all day. It's the best. So
Praise God. Thank you for that.
yeah, yeah, my
Thank you.
my husband and I, we do try to go. So we go on a weekly date night generally, and you know, sometimes we'll go for an hour. It's like, let's go back and see him. Like I don't have the urge of like I need to get away. We enjoy our time together,
Hmm.
but we're ready to get back and to see him after like an hour or two together. So
See, that's incredible because all I've ever heard is like, oh, you got to plan time away from the kids and take vacations and leave them with the grandparents. And sure, absolutely, like grandparents should be exposed to their kids, but like the way that it gets articulated, like, of course, yes, everyone will want to take a break from each other. It's part of being human. But the way that it's so normally framed is just that like child rearing is this burden that you can't wait to put down so that you can go do other stuff. Oh, I can have my job or my fabulous lifestyle. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm just agreeing with you. I'm nodding. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and the way I would phrase it, I was thinking about this today. It was date nights are good, not because I want time away from my kid, but because I want time alone with my husband. And
Hmm.
it has nothing to do with wanting to be away from my kid. It's just that it's hard to have a conversation when you're, you know, um, focusing
Hmm.
on someone else. But I do think that um, when you see family life as your vocation,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not waiting for something better to show up. This is the better. This is the good. So yeah, I could talk for hours and hours just about how much I love being a mom. It's the best.
You want to talk about being pregnant with your second for just a minute
Yeah,
while we're here?
it's great too. Like I only have positive things to say, and sometimes I feel guilty about it because I feel like on social media I need to commiserate and I need to. Um, it's just it's very much the expectation that we all need to talk about how hard it is to be a mom, and so I became a mom, and I was kind of expecting to experience that, and I didn't. And people will ask me to talk more about motherhood, but I sometimes feel like I don't want to sound like I'm bragging when I just say, hey, I just genuinely love it and I don't have any complaints. And then with pregnancy too, I get it. I have very hard first trimester and I was puking but I honestly think the puking was harder for my husband. Like he doesn't like to see me sick and he gets more I honestly think it's partly harder on him because he's like, what do I do when I feel helpless and my wife is sick and I can't do anything about it. But even with the nausea and the fatigue and all that, like I was telling a friend because she's pregnant with her first, and she said to me, I feel guilty about how bad I am at physical suffering. I'm just like I'm surprised at how I'm handling this. I don't like how I'm handling this. And I said to her, this is the kind of suffering that I don't even know if you can call it suffering, but if you want to call it suffering, it's the absolute sweetest kind. And most other things in life, there's like suffering that's attached to something bad, like you're suffering in your marriage because you're not, because there's problems in the marriage or, you're suffering with your health or whatever. But like the kind of suffering, if you can call it that, of simply being sick because your child is growing within you, like what sweeter kind of suffering could there be? And what a sweeter like redemption of the curse. Like, so I don't know. I just love it. I want like just a gazillion children. And I told my husband, I was like, I would be fine. Like if we were having babies, like every 11 months, like that is cool with me. So, he's like, I need to provide. And like, I don't want you to be sick all the time. And I'm like, that's fair. So, but yeah.
What a blessing. I really hope that's very encouraging to hear for both of you, all four of you, really. And I hope it's encouraging for women too, because you embody a lot of things that, I mean, generationally, women have been taught to fear. Relying on a man, loving a man, like truly loving him, being loyal to him, right? Being accountable, giving your life to raising children, sacrificing your own independent aspirations, to be part of a household, right? All of these things. I mean, it's like terror has been injected into the bloodstream of women for 80 years, if not more, over these very simple things that were not rocket science for all of recorded history, and you're doing it and enjoying it. Maybe it was always enjoyable,
and
right?
Terror and not only to motherhood but into pregnancy and childbirth and all of that. These fears are just swimming in women's minds. And when I do Q&As, I get questions about this, like I'm terrified of giving birth or whatever. And I get it. Like it's painful. I had an unmedicated birth. Like it's not, it's not like the best 8 hours of your life, but it kind of is at the same time. The track. Yeah. And so I would say that's a lot of what it is for women is the entire package is just steeped in fear and negativity. And if you say, hey, that's not been my experience, like, I really enjoy being pregnant and labor's hard, but it's good, it's just it's something people need to hear. So
Yeah.
most
Praise
precious.
God for that. Well, I'll let you get back to your job.
Yeah, sure.
Let you get back to
Yeah.
work. Thank you so much. Where would you like to send people to find out more about you?
I
and
am
what you
on
do?
Instagram at I'm_Anneliese_. I did change my handle. I still believe in being feminine, not feminist, but I wanted to change my handle to my name and have it more like personal. And then the same on Twitter. So you can find me, or on X. You can find me there.
God bless you and your family and your growing family. And Alexander, say hi from me. And I really appreciate you and your son taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you, Will. It's been a pleasure.